So once again, welcome to the peer learning program number 2, building and maintaining effective nonprofit board of directors, an always challenging task, and something that we think a lot about at Cal Nonprofits and often hear from our members that it's something that they would like to learn more about. So, Vanessa, if you could take us to the next slide, that would be great. So just a little bit of housekeeping to get going. I see folks are using the chat box. This is a way that folks can communicate with myself and other attendees. And there's also closed captioning available. So if you do want to access the closed captioning, you can do that by just clicking the CC button down at the bottom of the Zoom panel. There's also a Q&A box. Feel free to submit questions there if you have them. But because this is kind of what I like to call a come as you are communal meeting, as opposed to a webinar, we won't really have a dedicated question and answer section, but instead we'll have more of a discussion section. Great. We can move along to the next section. Excellent. And so just to run back a little bit about Cal Nonprofits, I'm sure most folks are familiar with our organization, but we really act as a chamber of commerce for the nonprofit community in California. And we engage in a number of different endeavors and initiatives. Some of those being policy and advocacy, others being education and capacity building. And then we also do a lot of data and research and analysis. So a good example of that would be our student debt project. And I'm excited to say that we've finished our student debt survey for 2024, and we'll soon be releasing a report to the entire community. So look out for that in the coming days. We can move along to the next slide, please. Let's get started. So what types of organizations have effective board of directors? I know from my experience, both working in nonprofit organizations and also sitting on some boards, that boards can be a tricky subject and can be difficult to navigate, both from the perspective of a board member, but also from leadership of nonprofits. So in researching nonprofit board of directors, I've compiled just 4 of the most well-known and successful organizations that have really effective boards, very engaged, very committed, long-standing members, and really these would be models that we look at when we're looking at what is an effective board and how do they work, how do they help the organization, and how do they help those organizations fulfill their goals and exceed their missions. So Meals for Wheels in California, Habitat for Humanity, Teach for America, and Girls Who Code. Interestingly, all of these organizations have really a 2-tiered board structure. And that would be a board at the national level. And then they have boards for their regional organizations. So Meals on Wheels is a great example. They've got a national board, and those folks are comprised of real industry leaders, people that have long-term experience, both in the nonprofit and corporate world. And then at the regional level, their board of directors are really comprised of folks who have a local understanding of the needs of their communities. And that's the same for Habitat for Humanity, Teach for America, and Girls Who Code. You can take us to the next slide, please. So I want to run through 5 slides here, and they're a little text heavy, so please bear with us. These are sort of the best practices that we've compiled for thinking about board of directors, defining clear roles and responsibilities. I know that I've sat on boards where it's a little bit uncertain as to what your role in the board is. So making sure to define clear roles and really positions for those board of directors is important. Those positions might be treasurer, they might be development director, creating a charter, developing the charter that outlines the board's purpose, those individual roles, also the expectations, and making clear also the level of authority making and decision making. Then clarifying the legal responsibilities can also be something that's tricky. I remember I was sitting on a board for a youth theater group here in San Francisco, and I was the treasurer, and it came to my attention, and I wondered, gosh, am I going to be on the hook legally if something goes askew with finances? So clarifying the legal responsibilities and ensuring that the board members understand their fiduciary duties, the duty of care, the duty of loyalty, and the duty of obedience is really important. We can move along to the next slide, please. So number two, there's recruiting diverse and skilled members. So seeking diverse members isn't just about seeking people who have a diverse background, but a diverse set of skills. So aiming for a board that has a mix of skills with finance, marketing, fundraising, legal, programmatic experience, particularly in the realm that the organization operates. This allows for a board to have a comprehensive outlook and understanding of the organization. So focusing on diversity, both in terms of demographics, experiences, and perspectives. So a more diverse board can be a little bit more creative, bringing a range of ideas and experiences to the table. Sometimes I've seen and noticed that boards are often comprised purely of sort of top tier, older, and sometimes retired leaders. But it's also important to include younger folks. And so often, successful boards of directors will include either someone who is part of the program, someone who is a beneficiary of that nonprofit's work, or if you're, say, in education, having a student representative is something that can be really helpful, because that voice may not be something that the board would otherwise hear. So having someone that can speak to the real day-to-day and lived experience of people that are working with your organization is important for the board to hear. And it kind of it helps diminish the distance that boards can sometimes feel from both the staff and the folks that they're serving. And then prioritizing passion for the mission is really important. Being on a board, I think, for most people seems prestigious, and for a lot of folks, that can be a motivating factor. But understanding and having a passion, a real interest in that organization, is going to lend a better voice and a long-term tenure to the board. We can move to the next slide, please. So the third piece is fostering engagement and accountability. And this can be tricky because I've seen a lot of boards, and I've sat on some where suddenly folks just sort of disappear. And maybe you've also had that experience. Sometimes people will sign up for a board not understanding the expectations. And so fostering a sense of accountability, setting attendance and participation expectations is really important. Making sure that board members are willing and ready to attend regular meetings, and also scheduling those meetings far in advance so that folks can plan for them is really important. Using committees is another way to do this as well. Assigning board members to committees that align with their experience, their passions, and maybe their background also allows folks to feel like they can utilize their skill set and contribute in a meaningful way to the organization and the board. And then annual self-assessments is something that's kind of new in the board world. I think all of us are probably familiar with self-assessments or annual assessments from your supervisor, but using tools to assess one's performance as a board member. And I think the self-assessment is really the best way to do this, because it doesn't feel like a directive or a prescriptive approach. But if folks are doing annual assessments, this is going to illustrate to both them and the other board members how engaged they are, where they would like to feel more engaged, and areas for improvement that they can work on to be part of that more collective unit. Let's move to number 4, please. So this also is a really important role, rotating and refreshing the board regularly. I know that a lot of time there's burnout on boards, and sometimes in boards that I've been a part of, and we've seen this at Cal nonprofits too. There are sometimes folks, maybe 1 or 2 people, that really take on the bulk of the work, and this creates an environment where one person sort of becomes the singular owner of the board. And so if there's time limits, term limits, that also allows folks to feel like they can really give their time without the expectation that they're going to be on this board forever. So having a set term limit gives people a horizon, and they can plan and say, well, I'm going to be on this board for maybe 1 or 2 years. And during those 1 or 2 years, I'm going to be able to commit my resources, my time, and dedicate the effective amount of influence and intrigue to that board. And then succession planning kind of falls right in line with that. Having a succession plan in place for different leadership roles, especially the board chair, to ensure the continuity of boards. So lots of nonprofits, most nonprofits are required to have a board. And so it's important to make sure that you're planning ahead. And this is really the responsibility of the board and the leadership team of nonprofits to make sure that you're fulfilling the legal obligation that you may have to have a board. And that could be a number of board seats, a number of roles, or different folks that are serving different capacities. Let's go to number 5. So conducting regular performance evaluations and self-assessments is what we talked about earlier, but individual check-ins, I think, is really important. And this is probably coming from the board chair, annual one-on-one check-ins between the board chair and each member. It can address concerns, realign goals, and help understand the challenges that some board members might face. It also might open up new opportunities. You know, having individual check-ins in a casual way might alleviate some of the concern that folks sometimes feel if they're overworked, overwhelmed, and disengaged with their board position. All right, let's discuss. So I would invite folks to, if they are so inclined, to turn on their cameras and join us for a little bit of a quick discussion here. And it won't last so long, but I'd like to ask some questions to the group and learn about your experience with boards and how that might be helpful for this quorum that we have here today. So my first question, and I can also speak to this, are what are some challenges that you all have experienced with either your own boards or boards that you have sat on in the past? I'll open it up to the floor for discussion. And I can start if folks would like me to. One challenge that I have faced with a board that I've sat on is that one person really dominated the space, took up all the airspace, had all the sort of legal responsibility. He was the board chair, and it really became all about him. And other board members felt sidelined and didn't feel as though they could express their own opinions and operate independently of the board chairs. Anyone else experienced a similar situation or had other challenges that they would like to describe?
I'll go.
Thanks, Courtney.
I would say I try to be very organized and get my board that all the information, 72 hours ahead of a board meeting. But people just aren't reading things. And so it's really hard when I try to have a discussion. So just getting people to read either, whatever materials I'm sending them to be prepared for a discussion during the meeting. So kind of pull my hair out at some point because I just don't know how else to get him to do it. It's been years, so.
Yeah, Sarah, I see you nodding your head. Have you had a similar experience?
Yes, absolutely. And boards are also variable, but I find that particularly when I'm in a board where I'm the president and kind of sending things out, and I don't have a really engaged board, it's much harder. So I think that's one of the things, like learning how to get an engaged board. I think having terms and having all the things you just pointed out are critical in that, but engaging people that really want to be on a board and be active members and bringing their best qualifications are priority one. And then kind of a lot of the other pieces come into place if you have the right engaged board members, which is hard to do.
We always hope that we do.
Yeah, that's been my experience.
Trina, I see you have your hand raised. Would you like to contribute?
Yeah, thank you. I'm happy to hear that people are only sending it out 72 hours in advance, because I have a board who wants it like a week before, and it changes, right? So, and they read everything. So in some ways, it's really great that they're that active. But the one thing I wanted to mention was that one of the issues that I ran into when I first started was there was a huge conflict of interest. So paying attention to those forms and making sure that there are not any conflicts of interest that are happening on the board has been one of the key things that I had to make sure was implemented. And it was difficult because we ended up having 3 board members have to step down because there were such significant conflicts of interest.
Would you be willing to describe to the group what a conflict of interest might look like for a board member?
Let's see. Well, I can give you an example. We are responsible for, we're a land trust, right? So we are responsible for managing a number of different properties. One of the properties that we manage, we have to provide financial information. And somehow, some way, years prior, there was a member that works for one of the properties that was sitting on our board. And then that person was also voting on the financial information. And he shouldn't have been a part of the conversation at all. And so it's a very challenging situation because the person also was employed by that property, and they were being paid for their time when they were sitting on our board. And there's like tons of things that are all enmeshed in there. And I let our attorney, run with that because she needed to get that person to step down. But it was just an awkward situation. Right now, we have one board member who is the owner of a property that we manage. But anytime that property is discussed, that board member exits the room because they understand that they can't weigh in or have anything to do with the conversations about that. So it's, I don't know if that helps.
No, that's really helpful. And it's particularly interesting to hear that you availed the use of your attorney. So that I think that's something that we touched on earlier, the fiduciary duties of board members. When you were working with your attorney, is that something that was a cumbersome or troublesome process? Like, how did you manage the conversation with the board member and the attorney? Did it feel adversarial?
It was at times, but I think that in the long run, that particular board member, I think, realized that, yeah, it's not going to work. But that board member also was a little bit overpowering, right?
Yeah.
And when it was brought to the attention, because sometimes when somebody new comes in, they see things differently. And so there was a lot of questions that I was asking at that time as their executive director. And I was curious why there were 2 board members who were employed at companies that we were managing their properties, and that they were sitting on our board. And so I just asked the question, and I guess nobody else had ever thought to ask that. But they filled out conflicts of interest every year, and they always listed that they were employed at these companies. So I couldn't understand. There was something that the rest of the board wasn't doing their job because they didn't know what their job was. So training the board to be more responsible for their roles has been a challenge. You mentioned about burnout, and that can happen to your ED if your board isn't stepping up and doing what we need them to do.
Yeah.
But yeah, so.
Oh, that's super helpful. And it's something that I was going to touch on. It sounds like you're doing a lot of managing up. And that can be, as an executive director, you have a whole host of day-to-day tasks and operations to run. And managing the board is just another really onerous and big task. So I think the best sort of guidelines are really designed so that the board can run itself, and then the executive director does not have to, I'm going to use the word babysit, but find themselves in a place where, gosh, I'm spending 10% of my time, 15% of my time managing a board that really should be spending their time helping me, right? Like, what we want from a board of directors is to be an asset to the organization as opposed to a time suck, right? Has anyone else experienced difficulty communicating or managing their board? What other challenges might people have faced? How about, I know a challenge that Aisha, please go ahead.
Hi. Right now we're working on board recruitment because we have a
Great.
small board, and that's our challenge right now. So any input and advice is greatly appreciated.
Let's talk about that. I'd be curious to understand in your organization, and this is also something that I thought of when Trina spoke up. Not everyone has a legal team, right?
Yeah.
Plenty of nonprofits do not have the resources to have a legal team. So, gosh, what do you do when you don't have a legal team? And Aisha, so when you're going for board recruitment, who's handling that process, and what does that look like?
Well, we've set up a committee
Great.
within our existing board to focus on recruitment. We're getting input from the rest of the board to figure out what they need in order to recruit and feel comfortable with the material about our agency. And then we've identified areas of expertise that we would like, and we kind of prioritize them as far as the importance of who we can find. And then we've also collectively decided what type of board we would like to see, and
your dream team.
Yes, our dream team. So, definitely a qualified, diverse board is the goal. And then that's kind of what we're shooting for. Right now, we're just trying to nail down, what to provide them, a protocol of steps to go through. So we're just kind of playing it by ear, but we like to have something more concrete and consistent that we can follow through.
Rena, I noticed in the chat you said you can use board lead who can assist in matching you with potential candidates. Would you talk just briefly about board leading and your experience with them?
Yeah, I'm gonna send the link here so you guys have it.
There it is. Thanks.
So
thank you.
So I was introduced to Board Lead by another nonprofit, and we went through the process of applying, and it costs nothing. Super important.
Yeah.
Nonprofit costs nothing, but it really outlined for us an opportunity to have more diversity on our board, whether it be age, race, or sex. We had a board of white males primarily on our board. And today I'm happy to say that we have 2 people under the age of 30. We have, 1 African American, 1 Native American, and I just am thrilled, and two women. So it's one of those things where it's just been a blessing to utilize them. Their process is a little bit long, but the most important thing for me was that it gave us a reach that we would never ever have been able to have, which means that those individuals looked at us and said, "Oh, your organization is of interest to me. I'd like to be on a board," and then they are interviewed by you and you go through the typical process. But what has always happened in the past is you start to reach out to those that you know, and you ask the board members to reach out to people they know. And so it all kind of stays within its own. So having this person that was completely outside of our purview was fantastic. And she's been a really great asset. We went through a second round of it and we didn't get a match. And now this is going to be the 3rd time that we're doing it. And I'm hoping that we get a match again, because it just, it's a fit that I had no idea was even out there, but it's a service that they provide. And if you've not ever looked into it, it's a great opportunity to. The only other thing I would mention is that one of the other things that we found was that looking at other of our partners and looking at the boards that they have and finding out when their term limits were coming up, so that we could say, you know, you guys kind of do what we do. You think your board member might be interested in switching with one of our board members who's terming out. And it's kind of a way to just keep the door open for others and let them know that, because some people, when their term is up, they don't like it. They're
Right.
they want to stay. So it gives them an opportunity to look at something else. You can guide them to something else. And then also, and to bring in someone new.
That's super helpful. I really appreciate you sharing your experience with Board Lead. It sounds like a wonderful tool. And I'm imagining a new tool called Board Swap. But I see you have your hand raised. Courtney, would you like to contribute?
Sure. So Aisha, I actually just went through a big kind of recruitment in August. And a couple of the things that I did that made it helpful and streamlined. I created it was either through SurveyMonkey or a Google form where I had some questions. It was kind of like an application to apply to be a board member, and had some good questions on there. I created one of my team created a flyer that looked really fun. It had I put the link to that application. I put the job description, I called the board job description on it, and I put a copy of our annual report. So they could link to all 3 of those things. And it was an invitation like to apply. And then I put the 3 or 4 areas too, like I had put a matrix together and looked at our gaps, like what we need. We were really needing a finance person and a legal person. So I called a few of those things out. We also have a very diverse board. So I actually called that out too in the ask. And so what I did then is I took that flyer, and we have a database of like 5,000 people that get our newsletters and stuff. So first I sent it out to all of them. And then we put it on social media, especially LinkedIn. I asked my existing board members to share it with their networks. And we ended up getting, I really wanted to grow my board. We went from 7 to 13. And so once they applied, the next step was I reached out to all of them. There was one I didn't reach out to because there was really no connection, but there was a lot of them that had a lot of great connections. I set up interviews with my executive committee. So they had you had at least 2 board members, if not 3, on each interview. They interviewed, I was on it too. We interviewed them, and I made notes of like everybody we brought in, and then we went and voted on them. And now we just this past 2 weeks have onboarded them, and we have a whole onboarding process too. But that, I don't know if I was just lucky, but the process was streamlined, but I also ended up getting quite a few people to apply.
That's great. I also see that Lauren has shared a really great resource, the African American Board Leadership Institute. This is a very well respected organization that helps folks source board members. I wonder if anyone has had any experience with this organization. I also, in the discussion that we've been having, I've been hearing not only about recruitment, but sort of the application process. I wonder if anyone here has experienced or structured an application process that has felt really successful, or maybe is experiencing one right now that is really challenging. So the way, the boards recruit new members can be outlined in their sort of contract or title. But sometimes that can really stymie the development of a board if it's, say, just up to the board chair to find a new board member, or just up to the executive director. So I think outlining recruitment sort of patterns or processes is really important, so that folks can feel comfortable about finding new members, and also not finding themselves in a place where suddenly, this is important about staggering terms. I know that I've been a part of boards where all of a sudden everyone terms out, and then you're left, oh my gosh, suddenly we've got one board member, two board members, and 5 or 6 have termed out. Has anyone experienced a situation like that? I have. But it can be troublesome. And then that also, that sort of power vacuum, and this is something that I think some folks have alluded to as well, can create an environment where 1 or 2 people really end up in roles where they are the sole board operators. And environments like that, I think, tend to discourage new members from joining those boards if they feel like their voices may not be valued or heard, and they're joining sort of a one-person show. I wonder if anyone has experienced of the group here, maybe show of hands, who is sat on a board? In your experience sitting on those boards, I'd be curious to know how long your term limits were, or if there were even term limits. I currently sit on a board where there are no term limits, and it's really daunting because I part of me thinks, gosh, I'm never ever going to get off this board.
Also, I'm on 2 boards. One does have term limits and the other one does not. The one that is not, I just sort of feel like it's going to be when I feel like it's time for me to move on that I will leave the board.
Thanks for sharing that, Paula. And when you plan on leaving that board, this is a good topic for us to talk about. What does leaving a board look and feel like, both for the organization and the individual? So Paula, if you are thinking about leaving this board, what would that entail?
I was a little different on a steering committee that was directing money for a fire that we had in our area at one point, and I left that particular situation because I felt like my philosophy no longer aligned with the rest of the committee in how we were operating. And I felt like it was probably an opportunity for somebody else from that community to sit on that board that would fit better with the group. And I think for me, that is the scenario that I would go through with this current board that I'm on, and when I feel like I'm no longer really effective in what I'm doing and how I see things, and that it's probably an opportunity for somebody else to have an opportunity to get involved.
That makes a lot of sense. In leaving that board, when you feel the time is right, would you be inclined to maybe find a replacement on your own, or what might the replacement strategy look like for that board?
That's a good question, and I haven't thought about that. This particular one I'm on now, I would probably be inclined to find somebody that would fill that seat. It's a foundation board for a hospital, and of course,
Okay.
their goals are incredibly important for our community. So I think I wouldn't want to leave them with an empty spot. I would want to at least give the opportunity for some options for the board to explore.
Yeah, I think that feeling that you're expressing of not wanting to leave an organization hanging is something that board members often experience. And it might lead to a situation where even if someone is burnt out or disengaged, they might feel inclined to stay on just to not leave an empty seat. But what happens there, and I think Paula, you really spoke to it, is that person becomes less and less effective, more and more disengaged, and that seat really then is less meaningful to the board and to the organization. Any other thoughts on recruitment or retention? Q1, please share.
Okay, thank you. I am here just to learn how others are doing, the running the board of directors, okay, running the organization. Actually, I created many nonprofit organizations. I live in Eugene, Oregon, but
Great.
I have a very important project in Willows, California. Okay? So this project is very important. And when I started, I organized the board of directors, founding directors, and the other directors. The founding directors, nobody can fire them, okay, but they need to stay there. Okay, so there are a few, founding directors. I am one of them. Okay, and our project is to create an air memorial in Willows, California.
Okay.
There is a important the aviation history there. So first of all, originally I'm from Korea, the Republic of Korea. That's South Korea. In 1919, okay, the Korea was invaded by Japan, so we lost our country, and the people scattered all over the world. And some people who fled to China, they created the provisional government of Korea in Shanghai, and in 1919. And they are the one, they created a provisional government, and they appointed someone in already in US, appointed him as a minister of the military affairs. And he's the one who created the pilot training school in Willows, California in 1920, okay? And my organization started just doing that, to do something to do with that, okay? So I found that there is a pilot training school building, and I found it in 2003. And then I became very interested in, okay, making it, converting to as a, the museum. Anyway, to make it short, there are a lot of important aviation history, okay, in Willows. That is where the Koreans had the first pilot training school there. And Jimmy Doolittle, he's well known, the American, the pilots who the bombed Tokyo and 5 other cities in 1942, okay, to retaliate to Pearl Harbor attack of Japan, okay? Anyway, so there are many other the histories in the Willows. So that's why I'm trying to create Willows, the Air Memorial, the museum, okay? Anyway,
Yeah.
to make it short, the way I did it was the founding directors and the other directors. And since what I was doing is very important, and I was trying to do that, including the best number of peoples in all United States. So my board members are coming from many different parts of the U.S. So from the anyway, so it's a very difficult. The other big problem is, since I'm trying to create the air museum, big air museum, it takes a lot of money. So it's very difficult to raise the fund. Okay.
Yeah.
So my organization is right now is kind of so limbo. Okay. But it didn't die, but I am doing a lot of work. Actually, unfortunately, I'm putting my own money. So the last year I put about 20,000. This year I put on another 5,000 my own money, okay, to do some projects. Okay, anyway, that's the case. I am trying to try to do everything what I can do. I'm retired person, okay, still old, but I have a really big dream to do something there. So anyway, I thank you very much for the lecture today.
Yeah.
And that helped me a lot. Okay,
Good.
but
I think
anyway, yeah.
I think you touched on some really interesting points, and one of those was fundraising.
Yes.
And this was something that I wanted to get to before we finish up in just about 10 minutes or so. I'd like to ask the group, what are the positions on your boards that have been the most effective or involved? Board chair for me would be is usually the primary person who's involved. Are there other titles or positions that folks have outlined that have been successful in helping their organization and help guiding their board?
Hi,
Hey.
Zuriel.
Hi, Zuriel.
So I think my board, we have right now the executive governance, audit, and finance committee. So
Wow.
I think having a chair for the executive committee, a chair committee for the governance, a chair for the audit, and a chair for the finance has really engaged our board. And I think those kind of positions have really helped our board with a lot of engagement. Especially because they do have to present their reports for each committee at our board meeting. So I think it really helps them, get ready for those end of year meetings or quarterly meetings. And then also having subcommittees, especially for like galas or celebrations, I think is a great time for board members to be a part when they don't think they're part of the board in general.
That's great. I really appreciate you sharing that. Could I ask how many board members your organization has?
Yeah, so right now we should have 24. No, we should have 25 board members. Right now we have 18.
Okay.
So we're kind of recruiting a few more board members. And part of the strategy we're doing is well, part of the responsibilities of board members is to kind of recruit other board members, right? So it's my job to kind of reach out to board members who I know have capacity to give, or have people in their network who might have capacity to give. So I really kind of build those relationships with our board members as well to invite them to our events that we have, or fundraising events that we have. So I really lean on those board members that have the capacity to give, to invite others.
That's great. And I think you touched on a really interesting issue. And this is something that I think can be a bit divisive among boards, particularly in nonprofits. I know that I have sat on boards where there have been give-get guidelines. Has anyone else sat on boards where there have been give-get guidelines? A give-get guideline is that you pledge to give a certain amount and also raise a certain amount. Is that similar for other folks as well? I think one of the tricky parts about give-get guidelines is that it sometimes can stymie the diversity of the board, particularly bringing in young people or folks that may not have the capacity to donate $5,000, $10,000. So I'd be curious to know how folks have navigated maybe some of those issues, and if that's been either a success story or a challenge.
I'll chime in again and kind of
Please.
yeah, so I've had discussion with our executive as well about how I think just financially some people don't have the capacity to give $1,000, $1,500, especially younger folks, and especially working in the humanities. I think it's very challenging for people in the humanities to have made like a lot of money, right? A lot of them are professors. So I think they don't have capacity a lot of time to give, but we have other responsibilities as well. Like, you know, promoting our events or just helping us connect us with their community members, and having an event in their region and in their communities as part of one of the responsibilities as well. So maybe just having different responsibilities that kind of make up for the dollar.
I love that idea. I also, I noticed when you said you had 24, or you're supposed to have 24 board members, I wanted to touch on this idea about the charter of your organization. So most of our nonprofits have charters that outline the number of board members that they're supposed to have. And often I think it's difficult for nonprofits to maintain a large number of board members. Do the folks in the room here, do your charters have a specific number of board members? And I'd be curious to learn what those numbers look like. Are there folks that have more than 12? Less than 12? Less than 5? Or no numbers at all?
You are talking about the charters, number of charters?
Yeah.
Actually, my plan is to create the 8 charters, because United States is big, and we have 8 divisions sort of, okay, we grouped, and each area I would like to have a charter. Yes, I'm working on it, but it's not there yet. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When folks have worked on creating those charters, I don't know if Trina is still in the room, but often these are legal documents. So folks that have a legal team, Trina, when you created your charter, was that coming out of your legal team or your board of directors or the executive director? I think you're on mute. That's okay.
Thank you. I came primarily from the fact that we have a legal team to help us with our acquisitions. And so, we utilized her for very specific things when it comes to our policies, and having her review them, because she was familiar enough with land trusts and what our objectives needed to be. I think it's really important, and it's worth every penny to have them look at your policies and procedures and give input, because then the board gets to make the final decision, but at least they know that it's been reviewed by legal. And then when they start to, kind of, what I see is the board sometimes pushes back against like what the restrictions are. They want to do something else. And as the executive director, trying to keep everybody saying, well, what is our charter? What is our goal? And to stay on that path, because we can lose sight of things. And so that for us, the legal part is really important and a lot of times you can get it for free.
I was going to ask, if anyone here does have suggestions about free legal aid for nonprofits, I would welcome them to share that in the chat. And in just the remaining few minutes that we have left, I'd like to open the floor up to any questions or pressing thoughts that folks have, maybe ideas that they came with today or topics that they were hoping to discuss.
I have one.
Yeah, go ahead, Aisha.
Okay, so what do you guys use for your board packets as far as for recruitment? Like what information do you include for to prospective candidates or
Trina, it
members?
looks like you have.
Yeah,
have a thought.
I'm trying to think, I'm thinking, what is it, what we give them? Well, we have the board responsibilities list. You know, once we've gone through the application process, which is like a 2-page document. The way that we've done it is that I meet with that potential board member and determine whether or not I believe that they're a good fit. And if I believe that they're a good fit, then I'll present them and their information to the board. The board accepts them, and then at that time, you know, well, it just kind of depends, you know, if I want to give them the information sooner so that they can make a very, very informed decision on whether or not they want to be a part of our board, which includes the board responsibilities, includes the conflict of interest. And then just our strategic plan. Those things kind of help them make that final decision of, is this really what I want to be a part of, you know, and where they're going and what they're doing. So those 3 things I think are the primary ones that we would give them. And yeah, that's it.
That's great. Super helpful. Any other last thoughts or questions that people would like to touch on before we sign off for the afternoon?
I want to just say that I learned the new things, the idea of the application. I haven't thought about it, okay? So maybe there's an application is a really good way of doing it. And also the about the you know give and get, yeah, that's good idea. I have that idea too, okay? So if somebody, you know, they donate 10,000, so he will get some kind of a rank, okay? So, you know, 1 star or 2 star, so that kind of a thing. Many the air museums, they do have that kind of the ranking. So I will be, you know, doing that. But anyway, I didn't just, it was just an idea, but I'm going to implement that. Okay.
That's great. And I think something that you touched on there is something that I wanted to also note. I think it's really important to celebrate the wins that boards have, the successes that boards have, making people that are serving your organization feel like they are noticed and that their contributions are really valued. So with that, I'll ask Vanessa to bring up our last slides, please. Great. I wanted to plug a really exciting upcoming event that we have with Cal Nonprofits. It's our annual policy conference in Los Angeles. This is going to be an in-person event, and we're really excited to be returning to in-person events after many years of being in this virtual space. So while the virtual space has really been a democratizing force for allowing folks like Kiwan to join us from Oregon, we're really looking forward to gathering in person on November 20th at the Audrey Ermis Pavilion in Koreatown in Los Angeles. I would invite you all to learn more about this on our webpage. We have a full list of panelists and a really great run of breakout sessions as well. We can move on to our final slides. So with that, I'd like to thank everyone for attending. Your contributions and voices today were really valuable, and I so appreciate you sharing your experiences with the group and providing advice and perspective to the others in the room. So I'll follow up this event with a recording of our conversation, but I'll also put together a list of the resources that we've referenced, as well as some resources that I have put together and that we also utilize at Cal Nonprofits. So with that, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us. And Kiwan, maybe you'll have the last word.
Yes, just I want to know whether I can get the access your recording of this.
Yes, everyone will receive a recording following this event. I'll be sending it out in the coming days.
Okay, thank you.
And we look forward to also having you join us for further peer learning programs. This is, as I said, a program that we're fleshing out. We're dipping our toes into a new pool of water here, and hoping to create a space for folks to network and learn from one another. So stay tuned for more events from Cal Nonprofits, and have a wonderful rest of your afternoon. Thanks again, everyone, for joining us. Take care.
Thank you.